So, I am Joe Stenard. I'm going to send this portion forward to my online class as well, and they've never seen me before. So hello, online class, and everybody. We're being joined here from fantastic students all around the globe, including such metropoli as Stillwater, Governor, and Troy. I hope that wherever you're watching this from, that you're getting a lot out of the lecture and enjoying economics. I'm going to switch over now to this. Time management. One resource that everybody has is 168 hours a week. And how you decide to spend that time is totally up to you. After all, it is your time. Many people will trade some of their time in exchange for pay and benefits. That's really what work is, if you think about working for someone else. At other times you might be, if it's your own business, you'll be giving some of your time to your customers, your employees, and your partners, your suppliers, and so forth. I've known a number of business owners, and they sometimes describe their business as a baby that never grows up. Very demanding of time, and constant vigilance is necessary, and anything could seem to go wrong at any time. But they still love their babies, especially when it's theirs. How you spend your time, though, is reflective of your values, and that's true of any kind of choice that you make. And I think that you might do a little mental exercise. I've done this before, and it's been helpful. I've made a list of, maybe I ask you to make a list of like the three most important people or things in your life. If you said, what are your three top priorities? And you made a list of that, and then you took a look at how you have spent the last 168 hours, and you see how much time you have put to number one, number two, and number three. I had a job for many years where I worked 120 hours a week, and if you had asked me at that time if my family was very important to me, I said, yeah, absolutely, they're in the top three. And if you'd taken a look at how I spent my time, you would have seen that I was never even in the state. So we won't talk too much about that, but you might wonder whether my actual priorities were reflective of my actions, not what I said my priorities were. So you always have an opportunity, though, to have another 168 hours. Like from the moment that I speak to you now till this same time next week, you have 168 hours, and you can choose basically how to spend it. You will. I dislike it when I hear my students say that they can't choose how they spend their time, that they are a victim of their own life or something like that. It's just not true. You decide what is important in your life. You decide what kind of forces you're going to abide by and what kind of obligations you feel that you must keep up. And then you embrace them. I mean, if for instance, I'm dedicated to my family, I don't feel like I have to provide for them. I really want to. It's a great pleasure and honor to do so. Like, I don't have to go to work, right? If I thought about it that way, I wouldn't enjoy work very much. I was looking forward to today. I was looking forward to what we're doing right now. I was looking forward to seeing you and hearing from you. It's just a different mindset. People that plan their day, schedule their life, they report a higher satisfaction with their life. It's more likely that they're accomplishing those very things that they want to, that their values and their actions are, in fact, more in line with one another. Okay. Now, having said that, I also, I'm going to tell you that a big shocker here, and that is we live in an imperfect world. I love a quote by Eisenhower. That's right, Eisenhower, 5-star general, leader of the combined Allied forces, won World War II, became president of the United States. He said, a plan is useless, but planning is indispensable. That's a great quote, because it gives you the idea that he, just like everyone else, right, ran into problems, both the foreseen and the unforeseen. And even though you run into these problems, it means that your plan doesn't work the way that you had it planned. There was some kind of little snafu. But because you planned, then you could anticipate some of the problems, and you had contingencies for some of the unforeseen problems, and you knew what your resources were, and you knew what it was you were going to accomplish, and you had a basic idea so that it would, in fact, be successful despite the imperfections in your plan. It's a great one. Also, regarding time management, Eisenhower gave us something called the Eisenhower Matrix. And I'll project it right here for you to check out. The Eisenhower Matrix basically allows you to be decisive about all the different things that are asking you for your time. So he said that you can, and he did this constantly with himself. Anything that came along, he would quickly decide whether it was something that was important or not important. And then he would ascertain whether it was urgent or not urgent. And so the things that were important and urgent, he would do it now. If it wasn't important, but it was urgent, he would delegate it to someone else. Delegate it. I zoom in a little bit. Maybe I'll make it. Is that easier to look at? A little better. All right. And if it wasn't urgent, but it was still important, then he would schedule it. And if it wasn't important and it wasn't urgent, then he wouldn't do it. He would do it later, as I think is the way he put it, but which meant later would never come, right? The now is all there really is. Now, if we consider the benefits of looking at it that way, then it allows you to determine what's important and what's not important. I'm not going to tell you what's important in your life. You are the best one to determine what's important in your life. So, like exercise, most people would acknowledge is important, but it's usually not urgent. Right? Sometimes once you get into a regular exercise, you really can feel what it's like when you haven't exercised in a while. It's like just like you have a need for it, just like you need food or sleep or any other biological need. But most people can put the exercise into the not urgent but important category, and they schedule it so they make sure that it has a low opportunity cost in regards to they don't do it at a time that they could be doing something more important, but they make sure that they get it in and they get in the exercise they want to. Something, where would you put, say, the latest Kardashian photos? Or if suppose you get an email that says, click here for 10 important things that young people dating are thinking about. Would that be important or not important?
Not important.
Important. Urgent or not urgent?
Not
Urgent. Okay, so just skip it. Those are the things that really take your time, right? But yet we're creatures of habit. So if you reflect on the last 160 hours that you spent, you may have said, I really played too much of that particular video game, or I could have gotten just as much of enjoyment from something else, or I really missed out on talking to my grandparents for half an hour. I meant to just call them up and say hi to them, but instead I played the same level that I played 100 times on this other game. And that's I'll be straight with you again. Something you probably already know: your grandparents will not always be available. And I've had some wonderful memories with my grandparents, and I would pay a lot to have another one, but it's not for sale. Sometimes the things that we think are important are not so important. Sometimes the things that we don't think are important actually are. So. Always a happy thing to think about. But actually, making nice memories with your grandparents. Hopefully, you have nice, loving grandparents, and they're still alive, and you can still have time to do that. Okay. So, now here are the vocabulary words I want to share. The rationality, assumption, irrational, rational ignorance, bounded rationality, self-interest, enlightened self-interest, and greed. Of all of them, probably the one that's hardest to define is greed because it's so subjective. But we will have a whole lecture on greed coming up. So it's something to consider, but I challenge you to try to define it. It's not easy. The distinction between self-interest and enlightened self-interest really has to do with whether you're just in it for yourself, or when you think about things, you're only thinking about yourself, or whether you're thinking about something greater than yourself. The enlightened self realizes that you're mortal, and therefore an enlightened person will think about something greater than themselves. Sometimes they'll make personal sacrifices for the benefit of something greater. Sometimes it may be the body politique, or it might be the environment, it might be to God, to their family, something like that. The enlightened self-interest means that you understand that there's more to consider in the cost-benefit analysis than only you and your costs and your benefit. But these other ones. See, the rationality assumption is the essence of our basis of our being able to explain any human behavior that we're trying to explain. Let me put it this way. So, I hate to put it all in one circle. I hate to contain it at all because I'm talking about the universe. But in the universe, right, there's very little economics going on. Because even in the universe, right, there's not a whole lot of people making choices. And remember, it's only about people's rational choices that economics can explain to any degree. You could study physics, and you could go anywhere in the universe and have something to say about physics. But inside the universe, this is not drawn to scale. We have Earth, right? Now we can start talking about geology and chemistry and so forth. And then on Earth, we have humans. And then some aspect of humans is behavior, subset, and some of that behavior is rational. So it's as close as it gets. But anyway, you get the idea? So in the realm of things, you might say that rational behavior is pretty small, and the only part the only use of economics is to explain the rational human behavior. And therefore, since we can't prove rationality, we assume rationality. All these other sciences that I mentioned also have an assumption. The fundamental assumption of all sciences, including physics, is that what we perceive is real. That's right, Morpheus. Right? You can't prove that I'm really here unless you assume that your perceptions are correct. That sound was a student's brain exploding. But this is the importance of this graphic right here. That there are some educated people that believe that we do not have free will. They've written books like The Illusion of Free Will. Skinner. You have Skinner from Binghamton, father of psychology, one of them. He went to his grave believing we did not have free will. So he said that we were all, everything that we did was just basic conditioned response. But I know, it's for those of you that think that's ridiculous, I agree, but it's worthy of considering that very question. You know, and since the way I think about it truly is that we assume rationality when we try to explain another person's behavior because it's a safe assumption. I know that I am rational, and therefore, because you are like me, I assume you are rational. But more directly, if you saw someone in the store and they walk out with a pack of gum that they bought, let's say in the store, they're just walking out with a pack of gum, that you can either say, oh, you can try to explain it using anthropology and psychology, biology, and so forth. But if you wanted to use economics to explain it, you would have to assume that they chose to buy that gum at this time, at that price, that size, packet, and so forth, instead of an alternative that they considered. And that's all we really mean by rationality, that what they did was not out of impulse or habit or addiction or anything like that, but it was out of deliberation that they chose it. And much of the things that people do are irrational. Blink and breathe and all sorts of things that you just do that are better explained by other fields. But if you thought about what you did, if you want to explain what someone did through economics, then you would say that they're doing what they're doing because, right? What you're really trying to do is trying to explain all actions of humans when you assume that what they did was rational. And you can quickly say, well, I'm not going to try to explain that because I don't think it was rational, so I'm not going to try to explain it through economics. But if you say, all right, like why is that person working at that job instead of the other job? Why did I, for instance, work for 120 hours a week and often leave the state for long stretches of time if I loved my family so much? Must have loved the job even more. Right? Are you saying something? What is the answer to that question? Why do people do what they do? And the crux of it is that it's their perceived benefits outweigh their perceived costs. The thing that they do is a reflection of that very balance between the perceived benefits and the perceived costs. Now you got a little weekend coming up here, and when you might get together with some family members, or maybe, as Dane Cook says, there's always somebody in your group of friends that everybody hates. You ever seen that? Okay. You've seen that one? Yeah. So sometimes you say, why is that person acting that way? And you might say, well, that's just the way they are, which means that you're basically signing it down to some kind of basic trait that's their biological or psychological trait. You're trying to explain their behavior not through economics but through something else. But if you wanted to try to explain that problematic person in your life, if you wanted to say why are they acting that way and you wanted to use economics to explain it, then you would know that they were choosing to act the way they were doing. They were choosing their words. And they knew they didn't have to act that way, but they chose to act that way because they were getting something from it. They were getting either, juiced by it. They were getting some kind of benefit. People were kowtowing to them. They were able to assert power or getting. Now, the kind of affirmations we get, like the reason why I like a certain kind of pizza, is biological. The reasons why I like it, the perceptions and things. The reason I like this over that, the particular kind of music that sounds good to me at this time, right, is very much all sensory and irrational. The reasons why one thing over another. But the reason why I choose it is economics. Because I'm seeking pleasure, if you will. And I'm seeking out maximizing my happiness and things like that. And if I'm enlightenedly self-interested and we're in the car, I might be willing to listen to a song that I'm not crazy about, but I know that is making my kids happy. And that they love it so much, and because I love them, I know it's not all about me. And if I'm like, shut that crap off! I'll drive the car! Then I'm being greedy. Right? Okay. So we're getting the understanding of these reasons, right? Your choices reflect your values. I'm saying that I'm more important than you when I do that. And if I say your happiness is more important than my discomfort when I let it play. You with me? And if somebody comes in and they're talking more about them than about the good of the family or something like that, then they're reflecting their values, and it's economics. And you might consider that you can alter their behavior by making sure that they don't get more benefit and that they feel the cost of their behavior. See, because a lot of times people do stuff and other people are paying the cost and they're getting the benefit. If you can somehow change the game so that they suffer and everyone else gets to enjoy it, that's sweet. That's the kind of thing. Now, let's take a look at this then. So we assume that someone is rational, and when we try to explain it, we figure that they're doing their perceived costs and benefits. We do not try to explain the irrational behavior, but I don't want you to confuse what we mean by irrational. We don't mean crazy. We don't mean that we disagree with them. We simply mean that there are lots of behaviors that didn't involve any thought or consideration of other things. So we'll just put that into the irrational category. It's not a put down, it's just a classification. The last piece I want to talk about here before we watch our video is rational ignorance versus bounded rationality. And it's very easy to get the two confused. And on the test, I give you examples, and you got to tell me whether I'm talking about rational ignorance or bounded rationality. Or I'll mention the word bounded rationality, and then you give me, I'll give you a number of choices, and you tell me which one is the best example of it. Let's just understand what it is that we're doing. See, if people are smart and they think about their choices, and yet they still sometimes make mistakes, how is that possible? I mean, some of you are interested in common pitfalls of decision making. One of the common things that we do, it's out of necessity, and I encourage people to embrace rational ignorance. But I want you, when you are using rational ignorance, I want you to be aware that you're using rational ignorance. Here's the point. It's rational to decide not to know something and to make a decision with only some of the information, even though there's other information available. So I noticed a couple of people brought in, something to drink or eat. When you bought that product, even though there was a nutrition label on the other side, you may not have read that nutrition label, even though that information was available. And you might, if we were to explain why you bought it without checking all of the information available, we would say that's rational ignorance. You chose not to know it because you knew that the extra amount of effort, the cost, if you will, of finding out that information would not have changed your marginal behavior. You still would have bought it no matter what it said on the other side. So what's the point of getting that extra information? It has a cost, no benefit, don't do it. Right? In economics, right, we say that people do what they do because the perceived benefit outweighs the perceived cost. If the perceived benefit is zero and the perceived cost is another 30 seconds of reading a label, then don't do it. The problem is that sometimes we think that we don't need to know some piece of information, and we later find out that it was information that we would have liked to have known. You go out with somebody and you think that it's going to be fine because they seemed okay, and then you find out all this extra information out about them, and then you're like, man, did I make a wrong move? If I had only known, why didn't I check that website before I went and said I'd go out on a date with them? You mean that? Yeah, like there's one that's kind of like he's a cheater.com and stuff like that, or stay away from this bad dude that
I didn't know if you were checking for like jail records or something.
Oh yeah, whatever, right? Sometimes, sometimes you'll you meet somebody on a dating website, and they change their status on that website because they know how you found them through that website. So they change their status on that website to unavailable or it's complicated or something like that. But they're on like 8 other websites still is like, yeah, looking for a good time for a short time. It might be good to check other markets. That's all. So sometimes I think being straightforward with people is probably a better policy. It's you don't have to remember what lies you told. You can tell the same story to everybody else. And most folks are pretty cool. You might already have done the same thing. Two people just alike have found each other. Bounded rationality. Sorry about that. Bounded rationality, and this weird word that's so tiny next to it is heuristic, or sometimes often pronounced as a heuristic. I use that word instead of rule of thumb. Rule of thumb is kind of a nasty thing. It refers back to a day when people were allowed to, men were allowed to beat their wives and slaves and animals, but they couldn't beat them. It was against the law to beat them with a stick that was bigger than their thumb. And it's barbaric. So that most people forgot that's what rule of thumb refers to, so it doesn't offend anybody. But now that you know it, it'll offend you anytime you hear that term. So what instead we'll do is just use the word heuristic, which is, it refers to shortcuts in thinking. Someone, when they're voting, and they say, I just want to find out what they have to say about this one issue. And I'll vote based upon that one issue. Which isn't quite the same as rational ignorance, because they're really, let's say, have you ever known anyone to just say, I just always vote Democrat, or I always vote Republican? They're not actually voting based upon rational ignorance, right? It's better to say that they abide by a certain way of things, right? I always what they're doing, and we all do bounded rationality. What they do is the complicated nature of decisions is such that they find a way to make it easier for them to make quick decisions. So they always eat oatmeal every morning. They thought about it ahead of time. They figured it's quick, it's nutritious, it's all right. They made a rational decision about that, and then they just had it set up, and then they just automatically do it. And there was a time when it was rational, and then there was a time where it was just they were sticking within their bounded rationality. Actually, there's lots of examples in corporations and in the military and and in government programs and so forth, where people say, it was my orders, this was the direction, follow whatever the orders are. The Fannie Mae was terrible for that. They followed things quite algorithmically. So they would do things that didn't make any sense if they were thinking about it, but they said, I was told to do it, so I did it. And it's kind of, for them, it made it easy to decide what their behavior would be, but it would be best to describe what their behavior was bounded rationality. Now, in another realm of bounded rationality, we recognize that our minds are not capable of understanding all of everything that's necessary, to fully understand a problem and its consequences. So we make decisions always within some bounds. You are doing something about that, though, right? Like when you were young, you only could consider a couple of possibilities and only could understand a couple of ramifications of your actions. And as you get educated and experienced and you travel and you talk to different people, your horizons broaden and your options increase and your understanding of the ramifications increase and your bounds, your mind is less bounded than it used to be. I think one of the big benefits I give to my clients is that I offer a solution that they didn't think of, or get out of a dilemma that was like a middle-of-the-road system. Oh, all right. Looks like a click.
Our bell rang.
Oh, all right. All right. So we've got just a couple of minutes here. I wanted to show you the video from Prager University that asks the question, do we have free will? What's the ramification? If we don't have free will, is it still good to study economics if we don't have free will?
Yeah.
There's right. There's no point in studying economics if we don't have free will.
In the external or physical world, we're all aware of standard cause and effect, right? Object A acts upon object B with force X. We all get that, because it applies to just about everything from electrons to athletes. But now consider events in your internal or mental world. What causes your thoughts? Some of our thoughts have external causes, like when we touch something and suddenly realize it's hot. We don't deliberate whether or not to pull our hand away, right? Our brain has already fired the instruction to do so, involuntarily. In some strange sense, we didn't really pull our hand away at all, because we didn't choose to do it. Our brain did it before consulting us. A second cause of our thoughts is internal. Say you're thinking about giving a big presentation, and as you do so, you get increasingly nervous and your blood pressure and your heart rate jump up. Now, nothing external is acting upon you. You're doing all the causing internally, right? Your anxious thoughts are causing your brain to send signals to your heart, and we get that. But now I want you to consider a third category of your thoughts. It's your conscious choices. Something as simple as choosing where to go for lunch. Now, when you introspect, when you think about your thinking, do you believe that you're the active agent in charge of the process? Or that you're just a passive recipient of the instruction? That you have no choice in the matter. It's all external forces, be they environmental, genetic, chemical, biological, or neurological. In other words, do you think all your thoughts have external causes beyond your control? Or do you think that you control some, if not most, of your thoughts? Now let's stay with our lunch example for a second. Back to the question. I ask you, where do you want to go for lunch today? Now, if all you are is a brain, an exhaustively physical system of neurons and synapses, then there's no you that's going to be making a choice at all. Your thought processes are basically just a complex series of colliding electron dominoes crashing into one another. It's just physical cause and effect, right? Something that can be exhaustively understood in terms of physics and chemistry. There's no you that's an agent that's deliberating or choosing or exercising free will. And that's why, if you are just a brain, you cannot have free will. You would just be a physical machine, a very complex but programmed computer. But if you're something more than your brain, if you're the thing that has the brain, then when I ask you, where do you want to go for lunch? You're going to start deliberating. You're going to be weighing your taste preferences, the commute time, perhaps even counting calories.
Your conference is scheduled to end in 2 minutes.
Choose one place over another. You wouldn't be caused to think about any of these things. You would choose to think about these things, and you could stop anytime you wanted to. So what we have here, therefore, are two different types of things, an immaterial mind and the material brain. You are the thing that has the brain. You are not your brain. Now look, even if you were the world's foremost brain expert and you knew what was happening with every electron in someone's brain at a specific particular moment, you still wouldn't have a clue about what's going on inside that person's mind. Surgeons can have access to my brain, but only I have access to my mind. This is what makes you human and not a machine. Psychology, the study of the mind, is not reducible to physics and biology and chemistry. Yet, there are many materialists, people who believe that physical matter is all that exists, that the only reality, including every thought, every feeling, every mind, every will, all of this, is totally explained in terms of matter in motion, simply physical phenomena. These materialists believe that we're no more than robots and that free will is an illusion, a myth. Now, why do they believe this? Because they understand that the moment they acknowledge that free will exists, that there really is an immaterial you beyond the physical realm, that there really is a mind, not just a brain, then there has to be something non-physical that accounts for our non-physical minds. Now, when you exercise
Your conference is now over. Goodbye.
this, you're going to probably reason, just like I did, that there's a great mind that accounts for the origin of your mind. But again,